Hey y'all, hey, it's Raw to the Bone. Happy Thursday, y'all. But for some of y'all, you heard me say that already this morning on Coffee with Friends. But I'm here for a different purpose right now. So, I always say, since Black History Month has started, I have made mention that it's Black History Month, but I'm Black every day. So for me, it's a celebration every single day of the year. But February brings us to that time where we get in touch and in tune and injecting ourselves the struggle, the trials and tribulations that our people have gone through and remind ourselves, right, how far we've come and how far we have to go. So, interesting enough, I had received a gift for my birthday in 2006, and I still hold this gift. It's a book that I received, and it's about 50 of the 50 women that helped change America. And some of these women in here are 1800s, 1700s, and some of these women in here, they have Oprah in here and women that are up to date, but I'm not touching on those women. They even have Lena Horne in here, but I'm not touching on those women, not because they have not made history, but because, their history and their footprint on life is pretty fresh in our minds. But I have made it a goal to try to read up on women that I had no clue about or didn't have enough information about. And so to add to the efforts that I've started by putting up different, information about women and how they changed America, I posted something on Sojourner Truth and I posted something on Phyllis Wheatley. So I am committed to this. I'm not saying I'm going to be on here every day doing it, but when I have a minute, I'm going to share. So today I'm going to talk about a woman that before 1982, I had no knowledge of her. Yep, I said 1982. In 1982, I was pregnant, okay, with my one and only child. And I was in high school at the time, 10th grade. And I remember Forest Hills High School, okay? And when they found out I was pregnant, I tried to hide it. I hid it for a really long time, and I told this story, I believe, on YouTube. But long story short, when the school found out I was pregnant, they did not want to maintain the liability to keep me in the building. So what they decided to do was send me to a maternity school, right? Not an alternative school, okay? I don't want y'all to think that. It's not an alternative school, but a maternity school, right? For pregnant women. How miserable was that? Imagine being in a high school of all pregnant women or women that just had their children. Because some women in there just had their children, but they had to finish out the school year in this school. You want to know what the name of the school was? This was in my days in Queens, 1982. I think it was on Sufton Boulevard in Queens. I don't remember the exact street, Parsons or Sufton or whatever. But the name of the schools was Ida B. Wells. That's right. Ida B. Wells. And before I went to that school, I had no knowledge of who Ida B. Wells was. And I kept thinking, is Ida B. Wells some woman who got pregnant at a young age and created some maternity school? And I thought that for a period of time. But then that's why we got to do our research, right? No. She wasn't a young pregnant girl. No, she was not. Ida B. Wells was a force to be reckoned with, like a lot of women in our history. Okay, so Ida B. Wells was born in 1862, and she died. I'm referencing my book, 1862, and she lived until 1930. And Ida B. Wells, she was born a free woman, but she was a descendant of slaves like many others, right? And she was born in a time where women still didn't have their rights. We couldn't vote. We just didn't have equal rights, right? And it's amazing to read her story because she talks about, in the time, women didn't have any rights. And so Ida stepped in and created women clubs, became a part of the National Black Association, which is similar to the NAACP. But I'm just going to read you certain excerpts from the book so that we know that women have been powerful for a very long time. And we, and sometimes on Coffee with Friends, I get on there and I say, where did we as women get this strength from? But guess what? We've been had this strength. We are born with it. Okay. So it says, I'm not going to read all of it because, you know, you guys do your own research, but, you know, I'm going to read you some excerpts, right? So it says, by the time of her death, meaning Ida B. Wells, in the 1930s, Ida had organized several important Black civic clubs and established the Chicago Defender as the leading Black newspaper in the United States. All right. Now that was by the time she died in 1930, but let's talk about what she accomplished up until that point. But just keep that in mind. A woman in the 1930s was able to sit at the top of a newspaper, right? And what was she writing about? Inequality against our people, right? So Ida was born in Mississippi in 1862. And during that, in 1862, everything was fine. But guess what? You know what I also found amazing? You know, she was one of 8 children and was raised and went to school in local elementary schools and things of that nature. But guess what? In 1878, there was a pandemic, a yellow fever that swept through the South. And it took a large portion of her family. And you know, when we think back, look what we're doing now, right? We're in the middle of a pandemic. We're still struggling, right? We're losing family members. Now imagine what it had been back then when we had to fight to get the proper care, okay? I'm just going to speed ahead. The other interesting point about Ida B. Wells is that I'm going to get to the most important part of Ida B. Wells, you know, one of the most important parts, but it's interesting how Ida B. Wells also had a Rosa Parks moment. Okay, Ida B. Wells used to ride a railroad car to and from work. Okay, and on this railroad car, the smoking cars was where the Black people could sit, right? And the non-smoking cars was where the white people could sit. And so she got tired of sitting in these cars and she went and sat with the white folks. Okay, and of course they gave her a hard time and they told her she couldn't sit there and she refused to leave. It wasn't about a front seat, a back seat. It was about just being in that car in general. They needed her to go back to the smoking car. And she was like, no, I'm not going back. Okay. It says when train employees told her to go into the smoking car, she refused, as Rosa Parks would do nearly a century later. Ida held up the trip. Okay. The conductor attempted to force her to go to the colored car, but still she refused. Finally, Ida left the train at the next stop, furious. Okay? Now, for the rest of her life, Ida's voice, her vociferous protest would sometimes put her at odds with other Blacks. Listen to what I just said. It would put her protests, when she protested against things, social injustice or inequality, she was faced with her own people, Black people, that did not agree with her fight. So not only was she fighting the white folks, but she was fighting some of us too, which is what we still do today. Okay. It says, who felt that her bold, these are the Black people, who felt that her bold refuses to abide by discriminatory laws would endanger the well-being of other, less outspoken African Americans. Isn't that how we operate today? The Black folks that don't want to stir no trouble because get mad at the Black folk that speak up and speak loud. We still live in this today. It says in May 1884, the young Ida knew only that she had enough of being treated like a second-class citizen. She filed a lawsuit against the transportation company. It was a nervy move, an early indication that Ida was not one to suffer racist humiliations gladly. Right? And this is in the 1800s, y'all. It feels like I'm reading something from today. Right? It says, near the end of the year, the local court returned a verdict in the favor of Ida's right to sit in a non-smoking white railroad car, and the Blacks around the Deep South rejoiced. Yes, they rejoiced, but guess what? Tennessee Supreme Court overturned the lower court's decision, and Ida was dejected. So originally, they accepted it, passed it, said she was right, and then later on, the Tennessee Supreme Court overturned that. It's almost like how Trump got into the White House and tried to undo everything Obama did. Okay? You know, they always trying to undo stuff that we do. So that's just one pivotal thing to remember about Ida B. Wells. She had a moment before Rosa Parks came along fighting against the colored cars and the white cars. And the colored cars happened to be the ones all the smoking was happening, right? And the white cars was all clean and smoke free. And she couldn't sit there, right? So again, another important movement around Ida B. Wells was when the suffragist movement first started. Now we all know what the suffrage movement is. It's a movement that I say I mentioned on Coffee with Friends, and I say I wasn't on that line. I didn't say I wanted to work, right? I didn't say that because I feel like women, when they thought they were giving us equal rights, they gave us more work, because now we're out there working and taking care of kids and taking care of home. All right. But this was during the suffrage movement, and it was at the beginning. Okay. Ida B. Wells advocated for the formation of women's groups in New England among blacks and whites. So she brought us together as people. Within a few years, Ida had a hand in organizing women's civil clubs in Boston and Chicago. Go Ida. See how our women do? That's another pivotal thing to remember about Ida B. Wells. Another thing is, in 1895, she published a red record, tabulated statistics and alleged causes of lynchings in the United States. Okay, come on, Ida. 1892 to 1894. The book described graphically the hanging, burning, and mutilating of blacks. As Ida saw it, lynching showed the nation's tolerance of unspeakable cruelty. It becomes the painful duty of the Negro to reproduce a record which shows that a large portion of the American people avow anarchy, condone murder, and defy the contempt of civilization. That's what she wrote. Okay. In 1894 alone, she pointed out 132 Americans had been sentenced to death by law, whereas 197 mostly non-white citizens had been put to death by mobs who gave the victims no opportunity to make a lawful defense, right? So these people, these mobs, carried out the law on their own, right? And they went and they killed these black people, lynched them, because they thought they were the law, right? These people did not see the light of the day and get proper social justice. So that's another thing to remember about Ida B. Wells. This was a humdinger for me. The National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, right? I got to go back. It says, during this time, Ida continued her work organizing civic groups. She also taught Sunday school at Grace Presbyterian Church and helped found the Negro Fellowship League. The Negro Fellowship League is what she helped found. Okay, a group similar to the National Association for Advancement of Colored People. So it's similar to the NAACP. Okay, in that it fought injustices against black citizens. Okay, the League also opened an employment agency for blacks as well as a boarding house for indigent black men. All of this work was less fortunate blacks created some tension between Ida and the upper class blacks in Chicago. Baby, we are still our own problems in some of the cases. Now, I don't mean to say that, but listen to what she said. She said, all of this work was less fortunate blacks. So she was trying to help the less fortunate black folks by putting up these boarding houses and assisting them, right, with getting their feet off the ground. But guess what? The middle class black folks didn't like that. They had a problem with that, right? Isn't this the same problem we're having today? So at what point, people, did we lose sight of sticking together and helping each other? Because I'm talking about in the 1800s right now. That's what I'm talking about, okay? The middle class, they didn't understand why Ida devoted so much time and energy to helping out country Negroes who flooded into Chicago seeking work. But Ida didn't listen to their protests and even worked to open a settlement house and that would serve a central service provider for poor blacks in Chicago. Despite her political and social connections, the group did not really flourish. Yet Ida never relinquished her belief as long as some blacks suffered economic and social hardships, all blacks should work to help them. All blacks should work to help them. Wow. Wow. And the interesting thing is they even mentioned Mary McLeod Bethune in her story, which, was president of the Ida B. Wells Women's Club. Okay. And so when I read this, right? Oh, well, let me read you one more thing. In 1913, as the women's voting rights movement was picking up steam, because this is another key thing she did, right? Ida organized the first black suffrage group in the nation, the Alpha Suffrage Club. Like millions of other American women, Ida and her group members celebrated when women were allowed to vote for a few years later. Listen, it's so much. This what Ida B. Wells, a story, right, of a woman, not born a slave, but still born during times of lynchings, inequality, social injustice. Wow, it seems like I'm talking about how we live in today. Right? We're not so far from that. From 1800 to now, we are still fighting for equality, right? Yes, women can vote. Yes, we can go to the workplace and we can work, but we're still fighting, for equal pay. We're still fighting for our rights, and our black men are still fighting for social, equal and fair justice. Right? These fights have been going on for so long, right? And this is why it's important that we stay on top of our history. And we understand why we need to do a better job sticking together. We have been a damaged people for a very long time. These people gave Ida B. Wells, her own people that were middle class, did not want to entertain the lower class blacks. We got to do better. This was my injection. The only reason why I wanted to share this on video is because I actually went to the Ida B. Wells maternity school, and now I understand why she created the school. Although why they named the school after her. Not that she created the school, because the school was created long after she was gone, but I understand why the school was named Ida B. Wells, right? Because here you have teenage girls that are pregnant. Right? And I'm sure some of the families rejected them. So let's just go with that. We got a school full of pregnant teenagers that maybe the family is not happy with. Society is judging. They rejected us, right? And there was a school created to provide for women in that situation, right? And the moral of that, the whole setup of that, seems in line with what Ida B. Wells was doing when she was alive. She created all these women's civic groups, and she was a part of the suffrage movement, and she wanted to see equal and right justice, and she was hard on the lynchings. She made it, she was dedicated to writing about those lynchings and what was happening to our black people. So hey, this was a Black History Moment with RAW2TH33BONE on Ida B. Wells. Listen, I took this from a book called 50 Black Women Who Changed America, and it's written by Amy Alexander, and it was given to me in 2006, but I'm sure you can find this book out there, okay? All right. And if it's not that book, it could be any book that keeps you in touch, that you could grab every now and again and read through some of your history, is a good thing. But thank you for sharing a little bit of Black history with RAW2TH33BONE. And I'm out, y'all. Peace.